Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, folks. Welcome to Cry Without Belts. I'm John.
I'm Jeremy.
Welcome, folks. You may have noticed there's been probably a bit of a lag in terms of output. That's mainly because I'm moving. I'm going from one undisclosed location to another, which if you have any sort of inclination toward the continuity of this podcast, you'll probably be able to pinpoint it somewhere. But if you don't feel like going through our 57 episode inventory and trying to find where I'm at, good luck. That's all. Jeremy, how the hell are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm very busy lately, so
Yeah,
multiple fronts. So
we've had a couple hangouts and stuff over the last couple weeks, but really nothing on recording. Hopefully, like maybe simul drop this with our thing with that other movie that we watched.
oh yeah,
Yeah, but it hasn't been continuity that hasn't come out yet. So
that's cool.
But cool. I know training has been harder for me to get done. I did like 21 kilometers yesterday in terms of running, but in terms of like getting training done, like straight training, I've had to break down. Oh my god, this journey of this punching bag. I'm finally getting a punching bag.
Yeah, it's your movie.
Now I'll move. I have to move, and I have to move this punching bag. It's not to say anything with the giant hammer that I have. Not giant, I guess it's a sledge. I have a small sledgehammer that I use for training as well. And Jeremy's seen it in action. He gave me the thumbs up on it, and I'm like, how the hell am I going to move this thing? I might take it on the boat with me. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll provide an interesting story along the way, so it's all good.
What have you been up to in terms of training?
Training. I've actually been working with Manji side lately, so it's been good to get back with that a little bit, and then just doing some exercises, and I mean that's the main thing. Just kind of going through some of those things that I normally do, but just a little bit more on a routine basis. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to developing a new routine. I think this goes nicely into what we're going to talk about today, because after some much heated negotiation, I'm moving closer to the beginning of the week than the end of the week this week, and my mind just turned to having to move and cleaning and all this and moving and packing and all this other stuff. Gotten me thinking about space and place and training. So that's what we're going to get into today. Jeremy, what do you think about can we train anywhere?
Sure. I mean, as long as you got the intention to do it, I mean, you can train anywhere.
But it needs to be somewhere, right?
Well, I mean
let's get metaphysical here. Can we train in the non-existence? Can we go into the void and the void stare back? If we punch into the void, will the void punch back?
I don't know. I mean, you're starting to sound like Office Space or something like that. No. Wherever you're at, I mean, you can train. I mean, whether it's a structured training or something else. Like one of the things that I was doing with my son this week was, I mean, he was trying to get out of grabs and stuff, and so I was kind of working with him on that. And I mean, that was just in the living room, so it's not like it wasn't like anywhere official that we did. It wasn't like outside. It wasn't in a garden. It wasn't downstairs in my little training area. It was just in the living room. So
I've seen some people who I've only seen this really once, but I've heard about this a couple different places where they're like, I train all the time everywhere. I'm outside, I'm in horse stance. I'm in the line in the store, I'm in horse stance. I'm in Saison stance everywhere I go, or some stuff like that. I've only ever seen it once where somebody takes, I don't know, the hyper serious people who don't have any sort of self-awareness.
Yeah, no. No, you will not catch me doing horse stance at the grocery store. I can at least attest to that one, but yeah, no.
You'll end up getting kicked for that one.
Yeah, so just.
And I feel like there's, to the best of my knowledge, and this isn't to get into dojos because I don't want to really go down that road today.
No, I get you.
But to the best of my knowledge, the dojo is not necessarily intrinsically a sacred space, if that makes sense. There's some people who've tried to definitely garner that image,
Right.
but it's not intrinsically a sacred space. It's just a room. It's a place you go, right?
Yeah.
But whether it's an out, it's something like your basement or your dedicated place you do something or a gym or whatnot, where you train is where you train, and how you train is how you train. Your example of the living room is the idea of even casual training between two people, not even having it all that serious, lends to that just still being, oh well, we can train anywhere, we can do this anywhere.
Well, I mean, one of the things I've tried to take in my training was a previous instructor that we're acquainted with mentioned, he was training some military personnel, and they were all in their, they were on their gis, decked out, this, that, and the other thing. And he basically mentioned to them, like, that's awful pretty, but go get your tactical gear on. Boom. So they all got in there, and he goes, okay, in your gis, you could kick somebody in the head. Go ahead and try to kick somebody in the head in your tactical gear. And when they try to do it, they literally fall over. It's like, doesn't work too well, does it? Therefore, there is a purpose for it, but it's not practical in real life. So I guess that's one of the things I've always tried to incorporate, not get so set up, with a hakama or a gi or whatever training. It's like, okay, today I'm in khakis, today I'm in jeans, today I'm in shorts, whatever, and train that way. Just how am I right now?
Half the time we've recorded a podcast or half the time we've trained together, Jeremy has either been in a Fears for Other People Bruce Lee shirt or in one of several Minions shirts.
Hey, if you're going to train, have a little bit of fun with it.
Well, and I'm very much like, I'm from Philadelphia, so I'm a hoodie and like sweatpants. You gotta have rock the Rocky aesthetic. It's comfortable. People say sweatpants is giving up. I say sweatpants is giving it your best, because you can move really well in sweatpants.
Right. There's nothing against it for me.
Exactly. Why should anybody have anything against sweatpants?
I mean, and technically, my understanding is when everything was created and everything was formed, the actual dress of the day was, a gi. That would be your normal everyday wear. So it's like,
well,
I know there's to a point, but
there's very interesting photos of Ken Tsuyabu training in late 19th century, early 20th century, like basically formal, like basically a suit and tie. I gotta find them. I had it like 15, 16 years ago. I had the old fighting arts when the old fighting arts magazines used to come out. There's just like these old photographs of him and like with his family, and he was just doing karate with his like nephews or whatever.
Well, look at some of the seminars that Mr. Oyata would do.
Oh yeah.
He'd go out there. Everybody else would be in their hakamas. He comes out there in suit and tie, knocking everybody around. So it's like,
gotta look good.
Hey, he looked like $1 million. So hey, more power to him. And I will say this. A lot of times if a suit's fitted properly, it's just as comfortable as any gi or hakama that you're going to put on. So hey,
exactly. And say we've done this rather successfully on this podcast is we've never promoted the traditional karate image, mainly because of the titling of the podcast, but also just because of the general of how we dress is we have got a hakama and a gi on top. And I was surprised to say, even though belts were involved, other people who are within our lineage are now starting to follow more of the Koryu versions of just, oh, you wear a hakama, a short hakama, and then you wear a gi on top, and that's your uniform. There's no after or before. Even though some people would say that's iconoclastic or that's nonsense or whatever. But that's your outfit.
Well, I'm glad you recognize that I'm not traditional, so that's all right. That's cool. I'm happy for that.
Well, and that's even in itself is, we can get into, I think we may have gotten this a little before, but I mean, that stuff, it only stretches as far as you want it to stretch.
True.
And that, I mean, it really shouldn't be the kind of end all be all in terms of training, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's just getting in the backyard and getting stuff done, or getting wherever, right? And getting stuff done.
Absolutely.
You know, Jeremy, I want to ask you, where is this in terms of space, both personally and I guess just with it in a dojo in itself? Where do you think is the smallest, and where is the biggest you've ever trained?
I'd say probably the smallest may be my basement now. No, I'd say my old apartment. My old apartment was really, really small. I didn't have, and maybe half the size. And I mean, I had to get really, really creative, especially footwork. I learned how to shuffle the hard way so that I didn't hit a wall and have to pay a deposit or anything like that. But whenever I left, I'd say that's probably the smallest place. Biggest place I've trained. The biggest place I've trained was probably outside of Seattle in a place called the Kanagara Dojo.
Huh.
And I will say this: I've never been to any place like that. That was unbelievable.
Well, what was context there? Seminars?
No, I mean it was a friend of a friend. My best friend, his instructor ran the place, and he went up there. He went up there, and I got to meet Sensei Barish and stuff. And granted, it was a keto, but he also had areas where people could come in and train different styles and different things like that. But I mean, it was just, I mean, I can't remember how big it was, but I mean, it was just, I want to say it was almost 10,000 square feet.
Wow.
I mean, it was just huge. And I mean, every detail of that place was immaculate. Unbelievable. I mean, just, it was like going and training in a museum. It was like, it's like, look, don't touch kind of deal. It was just really cool. But I mean, he was very, very gracious, very, 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 very nice. I mean, I learned a lot of different things from him. More so etiquette wise and history wise. So I mean, it was a great experience. So I mean, and I'm not talking about seminars, but I mean an actual somewhat training facility, I'd say. But I mean, Grant, I've been in seminars where, I mean, huge gymnasiums and things like that too. But
yeah, I mean, there's a shared space, and then there's a dedicated space, and then, I mean, the fact that there's that place still open.
What, the Kanagara Dojo? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, not damn, like, oh damn, it's still open, but just the fact that there's a place that large. I mean, America would be the place for that, because even, I mean, Japan. I'm thinking of the very recent edition in Okinawa, the Karate Kaikan. Karate Kaikan can't be that big.
Yeah.
But like
I said, that would be my guess. I mean, it may be a little smaller. It was just it was awe inspiring when you went in there. I mean, it's just jaw drop down to the floor, kind of Tom and Jerry cartoonish, like just unbelievable.
Right.
But that's also the place where I got to experience misogi for the first time. So.
Explain misogi for those of us who don't know.
Jeez. Let me clarify. That's where I got to experience misogi for the first and last time. So it's what misogi is. It's basically a chanting ritual, more for Shinto Buddhism and stuff like that. And when I did it, I was kind of game and okay, whatever. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to learn something. So we're doing all these exercises and stuff, and like loincloths out on the side of the river that's running in the back of his dojo.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's unreal. And so then all of a sudden he'll say something, and then we walk into this river. Well, the river is coming from the mountain, so in other words, snow melt is in the river. So the river is about, I don't know, 45, maybe 50 degrees. I mean, it's cold. It's so cold you don't even have the D on the end. That's how cold it is. So you get in there and you do like an initial chant, and then you duck down to where only your head is out, and you're chanting through this whole deal. And all I know is I'm glad I had that experience, because I have one heck of a story. But now that I know what to do and stuff like that, I'd probably be a little more open to it. I think it was more my buddy basically say, hey, watch this. Watch me sucker Jeremy into this. And I think that was part of it, but that's what Misogi is. And I encourage everyone to try it once so that they can have a great story like me.
Fair enough.
Sorry, didn't mean to.
No, I mean that's a good diversion.
I don't know if I've ever told you that story.
How long ago was that?
That was 1994. Because this is how I remember this. Because we were up in Seattle, and we went and did this. The day afterwards, we're down somewhere in the city, and they have the TVs and bars and all this kind of stuff. And we're watching the OJ Simpson Bronco chase in LA. So I mean that's how I know.
Same time.
I mean, so it was the day before that I did that. So that's how I remember that.
The loincloth fits. You must do service.
Thank you.
That's gonna get us canceled alone.
You never know what you're going to get on this podcast. So
no, you never do, and you know what? That's what should make it more exciting and more popular. To be honest, I don't know what other people are listening to other podcasts for.
So
no, let's backtrack. OJ Simpson trial, loincloths, 1994, big spaces, right? Spaces and places.
Yeah.
Supposedly the theme of this. So in comparison to thinking about both of those, and it's interesting you bring up Aikido in that regard, because Aikido requires a certain amount of space, certain material, right? You need to have mats to do Aikido. Aikido, people aren't doing ukeme on the ground.
Well, I don't know. I mean, unless you're really
Were they?
I don't know, but I mean,
I've never heard of an Aikido person not having tatami or not having mats to absorb ukeme. You couldn't do. I've seen some old dirt photos of like jiu-jitsu and stuff, but like that's way back in the day.
Yeah.
For karate, we're kind of notorious for just being able to do whatever, like wherever, whenever, however. In a lot of ways, we're pretty much and this isn't just us, but I mean, we're almost defined by not having anything. Literally empty hand. Literally nothing. I've got nothing.
Also, you're pretty much improvising on what you do have.
Yeah.
You got concrete, there's a certain way to do it. If there's mats, there's a certain give, there's certain things you're going to do a little different. If you're on a gymnastics floor, there's going to be something different.
Oh yeah, so. laminated wood versus concrete. I remember the first dojo I worked in. I didn't realize this at the time, but it was basically old 90s, really ugly carpet on top of concrete.
Oh yeah,
strewn throughout the entire school, including inside the training area. And it was just like the worst stuff to train on, in my opinion. Just carpet in general, I think, is the worst thing to train on.
Well, I mean, I know I've been different places got like indoor-outdoor carpet, and that's not too bad. I mean, it provides a little bit of a cushion compared to concrete, but.
Well, and then that's the thing. You're training on top of concrete. you're training on top of concrete, and that'll inevitably. I think laminated would probably helps with a little more balance in terms of like joints and stuff.
Yeah.
I think mats are better. I think tatami is, I think, ultimately the best thing to do it on top of, because you have a lot more give, you have a lot more cushioning in terms of your joints, especially in talking in terms of like drop, like a kusanku drop or a throw, or like just literally any technique you might be doing, or getting kicked across the room.
Yeah.
And then that would go into, what do we actually need to train them? Could we in fact function with no equipment whatsoever?
Technically, yes.
It's not it would be ideal or even what we want to do, but I mean, we can, as an art, function without any equipment.
True. I mean, obviously, if you're working with some type of weapon, obviously not. I know back in the days of yesteryear, I mean, some of the things I would do is like if I found like some type of pole or something like that, it wouldn't be wrapped in rope or anything, but every once in a while I just go up and just hit it, just keep working like Makawara practice. And yeah, when I used to work in the warehouse unloading trucks, whenever I was really training a lot, I mean, I'd go up to the racks, when nobody's around, boom, boom, I just hit them. I mean, they're metal. Now, I didn't do it for like 30 minutes at a time, but I mean, 2 or 3 pops, then I'd go do something else and things like that.
Yeah, it goes into that unconscious part of training, right? Where it's like you're just, especially if you are in like a more of a manual job like that, it just asks, because you're just, it's almost, not to say mindless, but it's just manual. And I remember when I used to do some painting in high school, and this is way before I actually learned bow, but it was just like screwing around with a roller and a stick.
Yeah.
Sounds worse than it actually intended to be. But like stuff like that in those kind of small places, or in those places where you're not really supposed to be doing anything like that. You're not really supposed to. If you get caught, it might not necessarily be the best outcome, but yeah, you do it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, even today, like some of the things I do, like if I'm walking downstairs and it's got like a handrail, I'll work on like my 2-finger grip by like, putting my hand on the one side of the rail, and I'm just curling up my index and middle finger, and just work on yanking up just a little bit, and that gives me a little bit of resistance whenever I am working on a technique where I need to grab with just those 2 fingers and stuff like that, things like that. And then like opening doors, instead of just opening a door, I'd take my forearm and just turn it over and watch how fast it flies open.
I sometimes accidentally open doors by punching them open.
Oh,
I will admit, I mean, if you're a karate person and you're not doing that, you really don't care about your craft.
I mean, I don't punch them open. I always
not like intentionally, like going like hauling up on a door, but it's just you push it open, you punch it, you just open it with your knuckles.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I've done that. Yeah, I do that at least once or twice a week. But I mean, I always think it's kind of fun to watch it whenever you roll your hand and put that torque on that door and watch it just fly open. I always thought that was kind of fun, but I still do that today. Huh?
Nobody should be listening to this and thinking this is any sort of encouragement to damage. I have different views on damaging property, but just don't go out there and be like, I know karate, ergo I open all doors by kicking and punching.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about damaging doors or anything like that, but I mean, it does, it is interesting, next time you do technique and you do like some type of scoop technique on somebody's arm, you watch them really drop then, but you're not really like, walking around, hi, I'm master, who gives a crap, no, it's not that. It's just something in the moment you're thinking about. It's like, okay, does this actually work? Does it still work? geez, I'm getting old. Does this still work? You know, so it's like,
Well, we can go from the big and the small. Say, I can't think of any like huge places I've ever really trained. Like no place I've ever really trained has ever been. I mean, and there's like shared seminar times, but I mean, looking back on those times, like I can go to a big like hotel ballroom or whatever, or go to a big gymnasium. But I guess that goes into the difference between a place that's like owned or versus rented, right? Like
mhm.
if it's a big shared space, that's one thing. And I hope more and more things like that are going to start popping up, especially like post pandemic. I think the idea of the financial burden of somebody running and wholly operating in a dojo is probably going to become a thing of the past. But
Oh,
that's neither here nor there. I don't know. What did you say? Working out of a place where somebody's owns it is better than working out of a place that's like rented.
I don't know. I mean,
I'm speaking as somebody's just ever barely rented out a place a couple of times versus you've actually had the place.
you know, I think it depends on. I think it depends on who's there at that point. I mean, if you got a space and you're training with different people, it's the people that you're really working with that's going to make that space worthwhile or crap. Sorry, I mean just I've been in places where you just have a mix of people that really isn't conducive to really learning. It's more I don't know, here hold my beer kind of thing, or here hold my belt kind of thing. Look at what I can do kind of stuff. It's like that's never good. So I guess either way can be. I've been a part of places where it was rented out. It was great. I've been part of places that were owned and it was awful, and vice versa. So,
Okay.
so
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too much into dojo ownership or anything like that because I've been in places where, I mean, it was rented. I feel this is a very American conversation to have to a degree because, a lot of dojos in Japan are ultimately shared spaces. Like they work out of a school or they work out of a shared gym, or maybe it's somebody's like family thing, but that's rare. And even rarer still to even have like just a business dojo on its own. But would you say should, I guess now we can kind of bring it to, and I feel this may garner the same response, but like playing like a backyard basement type of space or going legit and actually having a space. This is something I've had to deal with several times in just teaching, right? Where meeting up with friends or just trying to get people privately to come on board versus opening space open. Please come do class.
yeah, so sometimes I think when you do open up a space, I think I ran into this. You have a different set of responsibilities you got to deal with. And so you're trying to make sure those responsibilities are taken care of. And sometimes that changes the way you teach and changes how you interact with students. It changes how you train. So, I mean, yeah, it does throw a different dynamic. I mean, me personally, anymore, I'd prefer just getting together, in different places, my basement, wherever. I'd much rather do that than try to run a facility and try to make sure bills are paid on all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. Well, and those are the difficult things ultimately, right? Because if you do just, even if you try to meet halfway on that, like this is the issue I always ran into, where it's like trying to find property or trying to find space in order to rent, right? Though that kind of garners its own issues. You need to have insurance and stuff like that. But if you try to meet that halfway and be like, all right, we'll just meet in a park,
yeah,
uh, kind of like how that was somewhat. This is the only thing I will reference this for because thankfully it's gotten out of like the popular conversation when like Johnny takes his new Eagle Fang dojo to the park. I'm like, been there, been there. That's 100% a thing. They knocked it on its head, even though they got it kind of wrong. They knocked it on its head 100% because that whole scene where he's trying to go around, trying to find space, trying to do all that stuff, that is 150% accurate to how difficult it is to actually get space and kind of make something like that work, and where your ultimate for free, no problems, no questions asked are a public park. But then you're ultimately at the mercy of the sky.
Yeah. Well, or going back to Cobra Kai.
Not that I wanted to do that, but I feel like that's a very good shorthand, and I have so many problems with that whole thing, but that's why I say it's like Spinal Tap. It is 100% false and not in any way representative of what we do. And then at the same time, simultaneously, 100% true, and it's exactly how everything's gone down.
Well, I mean, no, spoiler alert, whenever Johnny leaves and he creates his own new school, which I think is one of the coolest names ever.
Spoiler alert for something that caught popular attention and was available on one of the most popular platforms in which to watch it in multiple languages. Yeah, I mean, come on, we did an entire episode on this, and we're 2 months out from it.
No, I know, but I mean, he ends up training in a park. I mean, that's the bottom line. He goes into there, but I mean, the only bad thing about being in a park, some people are like, I mean, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. People kind of want to get into your business and stuff like that, and that's
sometimes
that takes away from your training as well too. So
when I was in college. And I hope one day I can get a couple people who I train with in college get on podcast. But when I was in college, we had this one park we would go to where we could train on campus, but we really didn't like training on campus because none of us actually really liked the college we went to. So we went out to a park. One time we went out to a park, we did Boku Kumite in the park, which looking back now was like the stupidest thing ever, because you could get into a lot of trouble for essentially holding an amateur boxing fight, doing that. So lucky the cops didn't show up. But then the other time that actually I was in a park, we weren't really sparring. It was me and another person were going back and forth and just doing technique, and I was just trying to very wrongly. The wrong way in which I took advice at the time was, all right, I'm gonna throw technique really hard, and you do the technique on me, and then you're gonna throw the technique hard on me, and I'm gonna do it hard on you. We're gonna go back and forth and actually really feel it. And it was the only time the cops ever showed up. They didn't come up to us. They didn't talk to us, but they clearly showed up in response to what we were doing. Now, maybe it was a complete coincidence, but that was the only time we were like, huh.
Somebody called.
Somebody did.
Somebody called. That's
So you do kind of run into not liability in a park, because if it's a public park, I would assume there's no liability, or very low liability in that regard. Clearly, if you have weapons and stuff, if you start doing nunchucks in a park, depending what state you live in, that's illegal.
Yeah, I mean,
and no nunchucks in Canada.
Why? I don't get it.
That's a different story for a different time.
I don't get it, but anyway, I mean,
yeah, the weird, oddly aggressive discussion I had with a customs guy one time, and I wasn't even going to Canada. I was just transiting through there.
Huh?
Yeah.
Interesting.
He got really aggro at me for it. So if there's a place that you can't have nunchucks in, Canada, for as advanced and well off as they are. Hey, no nunchucks, eh?
Hey.
But
all right. Sorry.
Wow, where are we going to?
Wow, we've hit about everything.
Well,
I mean, one of the other things I know, I mean, I don't know if I've told this story or not, but when I went to Sensei Oyata's house one time, the first time I went there, one of the things I paid attention to is I noticed on the floor there were all these what we call Joe boxes. And I mean, they were maybe I could, I mean, it wasn't just one or two. I mean, it was all, I mean, it was down the hall. It was in the living room. It was here. It was there. It's just like, good night. What the, and, me being the dummy at the time, I just asked him, I'm like, why do you have that? And he just mentioned, it's like, never know when I'm going to be thinking about something. I'm like, okay, I can appreciate that.
It's the Prince never know when we're going to record a song thing.
Well, I mean,
Apparently his house is entirely wired for like sound and stuff, like in the bathroom, anywhere, really in the house. So in
yeah.
case you ever wanted to record, you just do it.
Well, I
So that's
mean,
really interesting. I've never heard anyone like do it who was at that, I guess, level of training or whatever have that.
yeah. Well, I mean, not that level of training either. And probably if I tried to do that in the kitchen or something, my wife would kill me too. But it's one of those things.
Which is that's a different discussion, but
Yeah, that's a whole
that's a whole different topic of just
that's a different animal.
how far will your spouse allow this?
Yeah, I mean, I think because I've been in IT for years and years, I think about how Google is. It's like you're supposed to carry a dry erase marker with you everywhere because all the walls are dry erase boards, and so it's like if something comes up, you just start writing right there, boom.
which is the ultimate, like, I don't want to say that in circles or encapsulates everything, but then that's like just what martial arts is as well.
Yeah.
Because boom, like I'm here, I'm gonna work on what I'm gonna work on, do what I'm gonna do.
Oh yeah. I mean, there are times you think of something and it's like, oh, I wish I had somebody to work with. And back in the day, I'd contact somebody and it's like, hey, I want to work on this. Remind me of this. And we'd start working on it. When we get back there. So
Do you feel like, okay, I guess we kind of touched on like, all right, the empty-handedness of it all and kind of some space and whatnot. Do you feel there needs to be a separation of spaces? Like, this is your space for training, this is your space for other stuff. Or because there's a lot of people who are like still training at home or kind of forcing to be into one space.
yeah,
Um,
I think it depends on the individual. My famous answer depends because
adult diaper.
sometimes, yeah,
We're
yeah,
hitting all the classics.
yeah. I mean, if you need it to focus in on what you're training, yeah, you definitely need that separate space. I mean, me personally, I have a small separate space that I've got because basically I really don't want to carry weapons throughout the house and work on weapons. I mean, that's the main thing that I work in down here now. I'll do empty hand stuff throughout the house. I mean, like some nights I'll be cooking dinner or barbecuing on the grill and stuff, and I'll think of something like, boom, and I'll just kind of go through whatever and just kind of keep working at it that way. But a lot of times my separated space is more for the weapons training than anything. That way, weapons stay in here. Period.
Right.
So, and
You don't have an
that's
8-year-old running around with a sai.
oh geez, no. Good night, no. And I mean him and I we work with um, just the Tonbo, hitting sticks together. And he has a lot of fun with that, and it kind of still piques his interest. I mean, he hasn't gotten to the point where, this is what I want to do, but instead it's just kind of okay, this is kind of cool. So I'm like, keep his interest going and go from there. So
I was training with somebody and their kid was with us, and good kid, really a good kid. He's much older now, but when he was much younger, um, like wanted a pair of whatever weapon we were working on just to do his own thing. I was like, hey, come do the kata with us. He was just like, absolutely not.
yeah,
just like, I'm doing my kata. I'm like, all right,
doing my thing.
do your thing. You do you, boo. And
So
I think that's true. I mean, the issue of space, and everyone's running into it now with the pandemic, but even regardless of that, before it was just finding the space to train and finding a place to train. And these are though somewhat separate things. They do go together because we need the space to train and we need a place to train. And whether it's at a dedicated place or whether it's a dojo or not, that needs to be something you need to think of. I mean, that needs to be in your head in terms of space. This happened with me where I was doing, and this is on the internet so you can see it, I was doing Pinyon Nidon, and I was allowing the limitations of my space to screw up my footwork. To the point where I was doing stuff kind of disconnected with my footwork, and I didn't even realize it until I had trolls yell at me.
Yeah.
And it was the one time the trolls were useful.
Well, I mean, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But I think you really got to pay attention to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you want it to impact your training, or do you want it to enhance your training? Because one of the things that I started doing was more along the lines of using that limited space as like opportunities for like learn how to really shuffle.
Learn how to clinch.
Yeah.
Learn how to deal with like close in spaces and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like most karate knows how to deal. Maybe not in the way that it's taught necessarily, but in what kind of the blueprints that are there, knows how to deal with a small space.
Well, no, I disagree with that.
Really?
I totally disagree with it. How many times have you seen, this is how you do it, and this is the only way you do it?
Right.
It must be, 2 feet this way, that way, this way. And that's where people that train in karate get into a lot of trouble, because they don't know how to improvise.
Okay.
They don't know how to improvise in that situation, in the heat of the moment, or how, whatever saying you want to put in it. It's like they're stuck in their own ways, and they can't see past it. I think that's, but once you see that, you're like, oh, okay, I need to improvise, overcome, and adapt. It's like I've got to adjust.
Right. And where I think the kind of limitations on space versus kind of maybe having the just over openness, as it were, like having a bunch of space to be able to do like really, really big long C steps, or really, really big long like whatever. And that's where your sequence of your footwork is going to be but when you get into a small space and you suddenly are constantly watching what you're doing with your feet, or constantly watching what you're doing with your hands, I mean, yeah, you do need to be careful and not like punch a hole in the wall, because the last thing we need is just a bunch of angry guys punching holes in walls.
Yeah.
I mean, that is defined as generation to a degree. If you're you should be able to do that in both ways. And to that point, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, it should. It should. But I mean,
doesn't always, and that doesn't nearly enough.
And I think that's, not to tie it back to MMA, but I think that's one of the things that MMA completely exposed. I think that's one of the things Bruce Lee exposed. Yeah, I mean,
go back and listen to our Bruce Lee podcast when we talk about this.
Well, I mean, seriously,
we have to constantly plug here, Jeremy. We have to constantly plug.
Well, but I mean, seriously, that's the stuff that people have got to break away from and really kind of look at. Is this really what needs to happen, or can this be adjusted? Can this move forward? In a confrontation, you're not going to be able to do, perfect footwork, things like that. You better know how to improvise or adjust using different tools and different methodologies
for the space that you're in.
Yeah, and I think in some ways, having a small space is actually a good thing, because that's a different training of different, different proportions. And I mean, if you go back to studying Sun Tzu, I mean, now we're really hitting all the parameters. I mean, if you look at that, or the Book of Five Rings, one of the things is know your environment. What is your environment? I mean, if something happens and you're in a dojo, hey, you got all this space, everything's nice and pretty, and, well, maybe not pretty, but I mean, everything's suited to your taste. Whereas Whereas, let's say something happens in line at a grocery store. I mean, not to bring up what just I just thought of that just happened a couple of days ago, but sick. But anyway, I mean, that's a total different parameter.
Well, and this is where kendo, judo, like kind of the stuff that requires certain space, certain materials, certain this and that's, don't really add up when it comes to karate. This is where I think that's where karate's strength is, and that's what a lot of people tend to forget. Is that we are literally the art that is nothing in our hands.
Right.
We need to be able to use what's around, what's available, and and adjust and make that more central to what we do.
Yeah.
And space is not excluded in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, not to take away from your ketos, jujitsu.
No, not by any stretch.
Not taking away from that at all, because I mean, very important skills that you're learning, and you're doing it in a safe environment while you're training, because you're constantly doing that kind of stuff. If something happens, heaven forbid, you're in the real world. It's like, hopefully you're not doing that for an hour and a half. You're doing it for maybe 30 seconds to 2 minutes. Somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I get that piece of it. But I mean, in a training perspective, yeah, you're right. There is parameters that you do need to have for that to take place. So,
and that's why
I just wanted to throw that clarification and just make sure.
Yeah. So we don't get all the judo people coming after us.
Yeah, we're not picking on that at all. So
no, it's less to point out the limitations of other arts, and more to point out that, and it's not to say other arts can't evolve or adapt, right? I don't want to make like stupid generalizations. Aikido could probably be done without doing ukeme, and probably be done without having mats. Same thing with judo. You could probably do kendo in a kind of a different and dynamic way, right? You could probably do a lot of this stuff in different ways. Generally, they're not, right? There's just like one way they generally go about doing them. It's not to say that's a bad thing. That's not to say that's a good thing. It's just generally how it's gone. Karate, on the other hand, has, just by its nature, has had to adapt to big space, to small space, to no space, right? I did see an interesting documentary once of a father he had, I think it was 3 or 4 daughters. It wasn't really a documentary. It was more like a TV spot in Japan where he had this upstairs home-built judo dojo. And he was teaching and his 4 daughters were like very strict competitors in judo. But he had like this very, very homespun looking, it's hard to describe, but it's just very homespun, very put together from just stuff that he was able to get. Nothing really super professional looking, but like he was very much about it. And his daughters were very much dedicated to and this was probably no bigger than the place I live in now, where he had a family of 6 was living in a house.
Different people have different priorities, so that's cool.
Cool. And any final things you want to say on this subject?
I think the main thing is, size is relative to your intent. When you keep that in mind, I think no matter what you do is going to come out positive. So that's just kind of my thoughts on it. So,
and I think if you can think it, you can do it, and if you can think about it in the space that you've got, and if you don't have the space for it, then you're going to figure out what best way to make it work in. Yeah. I remember making the excuse to somebody one time that I didn't have the space for karate, and they kind of smacked me over the head and said, "What the hell do you mean?" Yeah, exactly. And that had forever changed my view on training. Yeah, absolutely. Rightfully so. It was a good smack in the head. So, all right, good. So. Cool. Anything you got going on this week in terms of training, or just more Manji-sai? Manji-sai. Looking to connect with a couple old friends and start getting an old group back together that's kind of been impacted by COVID, injuries, death of family, different things like that.
normal
possible
life.
electrical equipment that we were using the wrong verbs for at one point.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah.
We're getting the band back together.
We're getting the band back together. Yeah.
We will come here for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day.
I love that movie. That's a great movie.
I have only known that movie in its extended cut. I found it on Netflix probably about 6 months ago. I was watching it, and there was noticeably parts missing, and I was mad. So, who on you, Netflix? Release the extended cut to Netflix normally. Stop taking it off and putting it on again.
Man, that's a great movie. Not a martial arts movie, but man, it's great.
It is. They definitely had to learn to utilize their space to the point that they had to destroy it effectively.
Yeah.
Speaking of space, I'm moving this week, so my training will simply be making sure all is going to be both mental and physical in terms of figuring out what I need, what I don't need, throwing out what I don't need, somehow boxing up my punching bag, which if anyone has been following on the podcast, it's hard to get, and now I got to move it after not only having it for maybe 4 months.
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, I think we've gone pretty well. It's been a good one. Jeremy, thank you for joining us here today or being on. And we might be a little quiet for a little while, depending upon how a move goes. But hopefully we'll be back sooner than later. With that, anything you want to say in closing?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, we're good. Everybody be good, be safe, be well, and keep on training.